The day my own son sued me for $900,000, I finally understood that love alone is not enough to protect you from betrayal. My name is Arthur Hale. I am 72 years old, and for most of my life my hands smelled like grease, metal dust, and burned insulation. I spent 4 decades working as a senior maintenance technician for large municipal water facilities, crawling through pump rooms at dawn, fixing ruptured valves in freezing winters, and answering emergency calls while other families were eating dinner together. It was not glamorous work, but it was honest. It paid the bills. It kept a roof over my family's head, and it gave my son a childhood where he never had to worry about food, safety, or stability. My wife passed away 6 years ago after a short illness that took her faster than either of us were ready for. Since then, my world had become very small. A modest, paid-off house, a garden I tended in the mornings, coffee at the same diner every Thursday. I lived quietly, not because I had nothing left, but because I had already given everything I had to give. That was what I believed, at least. My son, Nathan, had always been different from me. Where I valued routine and patience, he chased excitement. Where I saved, he spent. He drifted from job to job, always convinced the next opportunity would be the one that changed everything. Sales, consulting, digital ventures he could never quite explain. When he was laid off again the previous winter, he called me asking for help with rent. I wired him money without hesitation. That is what fathers do, or so I thought. So when Nathan called me 6 months later, his voice unusually cheerful, inviting me to a housewarming party, I was confused more than anything else. "Dad, you have to see this place," he said. "It is time we start a new chapter as a family." The address he sent me led to a gated neighborhood outside a different city entirely. A place with manicured lawns, silent streets, and security cameras watching every driveway. As I pulled up in my old pickup truck, I felt like I had taken a wrong turn into someone else's life. The house was enormous. Tall windows, stone pillars, a driveway wide enough for 3 cars, currently occupied by 2 luxury vehicles I did not recognize. For a moment, I sat in my truck with the engine running, staring at the house and asking myself a simple question I should have asked much earlier. How could he afford this? I barely had time to shut off the engine before the front door opened. My daughter-in-law, Miranda, stepped outside. She did not smile. She did not wave. Her eyes moved straight to my truck with visible irritation. "Arthur," she said sharply, "you cannot park that here. The neighbors will talk." I laughed softly, thinking she was joking. She was not. "Maybe you could move it down the street," she continued, "or around the corner. This is a private community." That was the first moment something inside me tightened. Not anger, not hurt. Instinct. The kind that tells you when the air pressure changes before a storm. I stepped out of the truck and adjusted my cap. "Congratulations on the house," I said. "It is impressive." She nodded, already distracted, already checking her phone. Inside, the house smelled like expensive candles and new furniture. Guests filled the space, laughing too loudly, holding glasses of wine they did not finish. Conversations floated past me about investments, travel, and future plans that sounded rehearsed rather than earned. Nathan spotted me near the entrance. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Dad," he said, clapping my shoulder like a business partner. "Glad you made it." He did not hug me. As he guided me through the house, pointing out rooms, upgrades, and features, I noticed something else. His hands trembled slightly when he lifted his glass. His forehead glistened despite the air conditioning. This was not confidence. This was fear disguised as success. The final confirmation came when he leaned in and lowered his voice. "There is something important we need to talk about later," he said. "Just you and me, in the study." At that moment, standing in a house my son could not possibly afford, surrounded by strangers who treated me like a relic from another world, I understood something I had ignored my entire life. This invitation was never about family. It was about money. And I had just walked into the center of a trap. Dinner ended the way all expensive dinners do, with plates that looked like art and conversations that sounded like noise. I barely tasted the food. Every instinct I had learned from years of fixing systems on the brink of failure told me something was about to break. Nathan did not let the evening drift naturally. As soon as dessert was cleared, he stood and tapped his glass, offering a smile that felt practiced. "Dad," he said, "why don't we talk for a moment? Just us." He led me down a hallway away from the guests and into a room he called the study. It was a grand name for a space that held nothing personal. Shelves without books, a desk without wear marks, a room designed to look important, not to be used. Miranda followed behind us and quietly closed the door, positioning herself against it as if she were guarding an exit. Nathan loosened his tie and gestured for me to sit. I remained standing. "So, what do you think?" he asked, spreading his arms slightly. "The house, the life, everything." I nodded once. "It is impressive," I said, "but I'm still trying to understand how you went from borrowing rent money to owning this in 6 months." Miranda stepped forward before he could answer. "We are leveraging opportunity, Arthur," she said smoothly. "People who stay poor think debt is dangerous. People who build wealth know how to use it." I looked at her. Then I looked back at my son. "Debt is only useful when you can repay it," I said. "So tell me the truth. Can you?" Nathan hesitated. Just long enough. "We are between income streams," he admitted, "but that is temporary. I have projects coming together, contracts being discussed. It is all timing." Miranda placed a thick folder on the desk. The sound it made when it landed was heavy, deliberate. "This is where you come in," she said. I opened the folder slowly. Years of experience had taught me that the most dangerous failures are hidden in paperwork. The first page made my stomach tighten. Mortgage application. Purchase price well into the high 6 figures. Adjustable interest rate that made no sense for anyone who valued sleep. My eyes moved down the page, scanning numbers, terms, signatures. Then I saw my name, Arthur Hale, listed as co-guarantor. Source of funds, gift from father. I closed the folder. "No," I said. Miranda laughed once, sharply, as if I had misunderstood a joke. "Arthur," she said, "this is not optional. The bank needs assurance. We just need your signature. You have the assets. You always said family comes first." I met my son's eyes. He looked away. "Nathan," I said quietly, "did you already sign the purchase agreement?" Silence. "We closed 10 days ago," he finally said. "We took a bridge loan. It expires in 48 hours. My chest tightened. "You bought a house you cannot afford, assuming I would save you?" "We assumed you would help your family," Miranda snapped. "What else are you saving that money for? You live alone. You have no debt. You have more than enough." "That money is my retirement," I said. It is my medical care, my future. It is not a trophy fund for a house built on lies. Miranda's expression hardened. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you cared about your grandson, she said, you would want him raised here. Safe schools, the right environment, not whatever modest life you think is good enough. Do not use my grandson as leverage, I said. Nathan finally looked up. His eyes were wet, but his voice was sharp. You taught me to think bigger, Dad. Now you are punishing me for it. If you walk away from this, everything collapses. The house, our reputation, our future. I picked up the folder and placed it back on the desk, aligning it carefully. Then you should not have built your future on my back, I said. Miranda's smile returned, cold, calculated. If you walk out that door without signing, she said, you will not see your grandson again. Birthdays, holidays, nothing. We will make sure of it. I turned to my son, waiting for him to stop her, to say something, to defend me. He said nothing. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I opened the door and walked back through the house, past the guests, past the laughter, past the illusion of success. As I stepped outside into the night air, my hands were steady. I had just lost my son, and they had just declared war. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen long after midnight, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall. I replayed every moment of the evening in my mind. The folder, the threat, my son's silence. The way Miranda had smiled when she mentioned my grandson, as if she had just discovered the one weapon guaranteed to break me. I kept telling myself it was just desperation. People say terrible things when they are afraid. I wanted to believe that. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and made coffee. As I stood at the counter, my phone buzzed. A notification from my credit monitoring service. I almost ignored it. Those alerts were usually meaningless. Minor changes, routine checks. This one was not routine. Significant change detected in your credit score. My heart slowed instead of racing. That scared me more than panic would have. I sat down at the table and opened the app. The number on the screen did not make sense. For decades, my credit score had been a point of quiet pride. It was proof of a life lived responsibly. Now it had dropped so far, it looked like a mistake. I refreshed the screen. The number did not change. Below it was a list of alerts. New accounts opened, high utilization, missed payments. My hands began to shake. I logged into the detailed report. 3 credit cards, all opened within the last 6 weeks, all maxed out. Tens of thousands of dollars spent on furniture, electronics, clothing, restaurants. I scrolled slowly, reading every charge. The billing address stopped me cold. It was the address of the house I had just walked out of. I sat there staring at the screen, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were telling it. This was not borrowing. This was not misunderstanding. This was theft. Nathan had used my identity. He knew my social security number. I remembered the day clearly now. He had helped me update my health insurance paperwork earlier that year. He had insisted on handling the online forms because they were confusing. I had thanked him. I had trusted him. Trust, I realized, is just another word for access. I felt something shift inside me then. The grief did not vanish, but it hardened. It became something sharper, something useful. I did not call my son. I did not call Miranda. I called the fraud department of my bank. "My name is Arthur Hale," I said when the representative answered. "I need to report identity theft." There was a pause. Then the questions began. Dates, charges, locations. I answered them all calmly, methodically, like diagnosing a mechanical failure. "Who do you believe is responsible?" the representative asked. I looked at the framed photo on the wall across from me. Nathan, at 12, holding a fishing rod, grinning like the world had never disappointed him. "My son," I said. The next 2 hours were a blur of confirmations, account freezes, password changes, and case numbers. By the time the call ended, every account tied to my name was locked down. No more spending, no more access. At dawn, I showered and dressed as if it were a normal day. My reflection in the mirror looked older than it had the night before, but also clearer. I was no longer guessing what kind of man my son had become. My phone began ringing before breakfast. Nathan, then Miranda, then Nathan again. I let every call go unanswered. The first voicemail came through just after 7. "Dad, what did you do?" Nathan's voice demanded. "The movers say the card was declined. Call me now." The second voicemail was Miranda. She was screaming, accusing, threatening. "You are going to fix this, Arthur," she shrieked, "or I swear you will regret it." I saved every message. By mid-morning, I drove to the police station. I knew the officer at the desk. I had repaired his sump pump years earlier. He looked surprised to see me. "Arthur, what's going on?" he asked. "I need to file a report," I said. "Identity theft and harassment." He did not smile after that. When I left the station with a copy of the report in my hand, the sky was overcast. The air felt heavy. I sat in my truck for a long moment before starting the engine. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a crime. And as I pulled out of the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. Another credit alert. New credit inquiry blocked. They were still trying. That was when I understood the truth that made my stomach drop. They had never planned to ask for my help. They had planned to take it. And if I did not stop them now, they would not stop until there was nothing left of me to steal. 2 days after I filed the fraud report, the knock came at my door. It was not loud or aggressive. It was measured, professional. The kind of knock that carries authority without raising its voice. When I opened the door, a uniformed deputy stood on my porch holding a thick envelope. "Arthur Hale?" he asked. "Yes. You have been served." He handed me the papers, tipped his hat slightly, and walked back to his cruiser without another word. I stood there holding the envelope long after he drove away, feeling the weight of it sink into my bones. My son had done it. I carried the envelope inside and sat at the kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast alone for years. I opened it carefully, as if it might explode. The first page made my chest tighten. Nathan Hale and Miranda Hale versus Arthur Hale. They were suing me for $900,000. I read the complaint slowly, line by line, forcing myself not to skim, not to deny. They accused me of breaching a verbal agreement, of intentionally causing emotional distress, of promising financial support and withdrawing it maliciously. They claimed my refusal had caused panic attacks, insomnia, humiliation, and financial ruin. In 40 pages, they rewrote my life. They painted me as a manipulative old man who had dangled money in front of them and then ripped it away for pleasure. They claimed I had promised to fund their home as a gift and then turned cruel without warning. They demanded not only the down payment, but damages, penalties, and legal fees that would wipe out everything I had saved. I set the papers down and stared at the wall. I was not angry yet. I was stunned. That feeling did not last. By the end of the day, the pressure campaign escalated. A patrol car pulled up outside my house just after sunset. 2 officers approached my door, hands resting near their belts. I opened it before they could knock. "Mr. Hale," one of them said, "we are responding to a complaint." "Let me guess," I said. "Harassment." The officer did not react. "Your son and daughter-in-law reported that you attempted to contact their child's school and made them feel unsafe." I felt something cold slide down my spine. "That is a lie," I said evenly. "I went to drop off a birthday gift. I left when asked." The officer wrote something down. "Sir, this is a formal warning. Until further notice, you are to have no contact with them or their child. Any further complaints could result in a restraining order." I understood then what they were doing. They were not just suing me. They were building a record. They were creating a paper trail that painted me as unstable, aggressive, and dangerous. They wanted leverage. They wanted control. And if the court believed their story, they would not just take my money. They could take my autonomy. After the officers left, I sat in the dark with the lawsuit spread out on the table and my phone beside it, vibrating endlessly with messages I did not answer. Nathan sent one text that night. "You forced us to do this." I deleted it. The next morning, I called an attorney recommended by a friend, a woman known for handling estate disputes and elder abuse cases. When she answered, I did not explain. I did not soften it. "My son is suing me for $900,000, I said, "and he stole my identity." There was a pause. Then she said, "Come in tomorrow morning. Bring everything." By the time I hung up, the grief finally arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. I walked into my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept old photographs. Nathan as a toddler on my shoulders. Nathan holding a report card. Nathan standing beside his mother at graduation. I realized something that made my hands curl into fists. They did not see me as a father anymore. They saw me as an obstacle. And obstacles, in their world, were meant to be removed. I put the photos away and closed the drawer. If they wanted an enemy, I would stop pretending they were family. Because from this point on, everything they did would be answered. Not with anger, but with truth. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and fresh coffee. It was quiet in the way serious places always are, as if the walls themselves understood the weight of what was said inside them. Her name was Evelyn Cross. She did not waste time on sympathy or small talk. She spread my documents across the table and began reading with the calm focus of someone who had seen families destroy each other before. "Your son is not acting emotionally," she said after a long silence. "He is acting strategically." That sentence settled heavily in my chest. She asked questions I had not thought to ask. Dates, timelines, loan structures. She requested the full mortgage origination file from the lender and filed immediate motions to preserve records. Nathan and Miranda, confident and arrogant, complied without resistance. They believed the paperwork would support their story. It did the opposite. 3 days later, Evelyn called me back to her office. Her voice on the phone was controlled, but there was an edge beneath it. "Arthur," she said, "I need you to come in. Now." She did not offer me a seat when I arrived. Instead, she slid a single document across the desk. "Do you recognize this?" she asked. I looked down. It was a gift certification letter, a standard document required by lenders when large sums are gifted for a property purchase. It stated that I had gifted my son $120,000. It stated that the funds had already been transferred. It stated there was no obligation to repay. At the bottom was my name, and a signature that looked like mine. I felt the room tilt slightly. "I never signed this," I said. "I know," Evelyn replied. "I already checked." She pointed to the date on the form. It had been signed on a Tuesday, 2 weeks before the housewarming party. "Where were you that day, Arthur?"
I did not hesitate. I was out of state. I was attending a regional maintenance conference. I stayed in a hotel. I still have the receipts. Evelyn nodded. "Exactly." She leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "This document creates a fatal contradiction for them," she said, "and they do not even realize it yet." She explained it slowly, carefully, the way you explain a dangerous mechanism before touching it. "If this letter is true," she said, "then the money was already given, which means they have no grounds to sue you for it. Their entire case collapses." "And if it is false," I asked, "then your son committed mortgage fraud by submitting a forged document to a federally insured lender. That is not a civil issue. That is a felony." The word hung in the air between us. Felony. I thought back to the lawsuit, to the accusations, to the police warning on my porch, to the way they tried to have me labeled unstable. They were not just trying to take my money. They were trying to bury me under my own name. Evelyn continued. "There is more." She opened another folder. Inside were transaction histories, internal lender notes, verification logs. "Your son claimed under oath that he never received the funds and that you backed out at the last moment. But this letter states the funds were already transferred and verified. So either he lied to the court or he lied to the bank." She looked me directly in the eyes. "And lying to a bank is far worse." My hands were steady as I rested them on the desk. I felt no triumph, no relief, only a deep, hollow understanding. He had crossed a line that could not be erased. Evelyn closed the folder. "Here is what happens next," she said. "We do not reveal this immediately. We let them continue. We let them testify. We let them repeat their story under oath. The more they commit to it, the stronger this becomes." She paused. "When the time comes, this document will not just end the lawsuit. It will end their credibility." I nodded slowly. They thought they were dragging an old man into court to scare him into writing a check. They never imagined they had already handed me the weapon that would destroy them. And as I left the office that day, I realized something chilling. Nathan did not just betray me in anger or desperation. He planned this, which meant the man I was about to face in court was no longer my son. He was a stranger who had gambled his freedom on the belief that I would stay silent. He was wrong. The courthouse was colder than it needed to be, not from the air conditioning, but from the silence. The kind of silence built from fear, expectation, and people waiting for other people's lives to unravel. I sat at the defense table beside Evelyn, my hands folded neatly, my back straight. I wore the same suit I had bought for my wife's funeral years earlier. It still fit, barely. Across the aisle sat my son and his wife. Nathan looked different than he had at the housewarming party, thinner, sharper. His confidence had been polished into something fragile.
Miranda, on the other hand, looked serene. Soft colors, modest dress, hair pulled back neatly. She held a tissue in one hand, as if she had rehearsed the moment she would need it. They looked like victims. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then everyone sat. And just like that, my family became a case number. Their attorney began with an opening statement that felt like a sermon. He spoke about broken promises, about a father who had encouraged ambition and then punished it. He described my refusal as sudden and cruel, my behavior as humiliating and unstable. He painted a picture of a young family pushed to the brink by an aging man who could not stand seeing his son succeed. I did not move. Evelyn had warned me, do not react. Let them talk. Every word they say is a thread. Eventually, they will hang themselves with it. Miranda was called first.
She walked to the stand slowly, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes glistening. When she spoke, her voice trembled in exactly the right places.
"Arthur promised us the money," she said. "He told us to find a home and not worry. He said family should help family."
She described panic attacks, sleepless nights, fear for her child's future. She spoke about how I poured wine on their rug and stormed out, how terrified she had felt in her own home. I watched the jury. Some nodded. One woman frowned at me. Then Nathan took the stand. Seeing my son swear to tell the truth felt worse than hearing him lie. He repeated the story, the promise, the encouragement, the gift. He insisted they could not have purchased the house without my commitment, that everything had been built on my word. And then came the key moment. Their attorney asked, "Did you ever receive the $120,000 from your father?" Nathan answered quickly, "No." He shook his head firmly. He pulled out at the last moment. The money was never transferred. Evelyn's pen stopped moving. She stood slowly when it was her turn.
"Mr. Hale," she said calmly, "you testified that the funds were never transferred to you. Is that correct?"
"Yes," Nathan said.
"Absolutely. And you testified that the money was promised as a gift, not a loan."
"Correct."
"And without that gift, you could not qualify for the mortgage."
"Yes." Evelyn nodded once.
"Thank you. No further questions."
Nathan looked confused. Miranda looked relieved. They thought they had won something. What they did not realize was that the room had just shifted. Evelyn stood again moments later, holding a single document.
"Your Honor," she said, "we would like to introduce Defense Exhibit A."
The bailiff took the paper. The judge reviewed it silently. Evelyn turned to Nathan.
"Mr. Hale, do you recognize this document?"
Nathan swallowed.
"Yes," he said. "That is the gift letter. Please read the first sentence aloud."
Nathan hesitated. His voice cracked as he read.
I, Arthur Hale, hereby certify that I have gifted $120,000 to my son, Nathan Hale. Evelyn stepped closer. And the next line. Nathan's hands began to shake. The funds have been transferred and are currently available in the borrower's account. The courtroom went still. Evelyn's voice was steady. Mr. Hale, you told this court under oath that the money was never transferred. But this document, submitted to your lender, states that it was. One of these statements is false. She paused. Which one is the lie? Nathan looked at his attorney. His attorney did not look back. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, Nathan whispered,
I needed the letter to close the loan. Evelyn nodded. So you submitted a false document to a bank? He did not answer. Evelyn turned to the judge. Your Honor, this witness has just admitted to submitting a forged financial document to secure a mortgage. Nathan's voice broke. I did not forge it, he said weakly. Evelyn raised her hand slightly. Then who signed my client's name? Nathan's shoulders collapsed. I did. The sound that followed was not loud. It was collective, breath leaving the room. In that moment, I did not feel victory. I felt the final separation between the man sitting on the stand and the boy I once held on my shoulders. The performance was over, and the consequences were just beginning. The courtroom did not erupt when Nathan confessed. There was no shouting, no dramatic gasp, just a deep, collective stillness, as if everyone present understood that something irreversible had just happened. The kind of silence that follows a structural collapse, when the dust has not yet settled, and no one knows who is still standing. The judge leaned forward in his chair. Mr. Hale, he said, his voice low and controlled. You are admitting under oath that you forged your father's signature on a financial document submitted to obtain a mortgage from a federally insured lender. Is that your testimony?
Nathan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Yes, Your Honor. Miranda shook her head violently. No, she said, that is not what happened. He promised us the money. We were just moving things forward. The judge raised a hand. Ma'am, you will remain silent unless addressed. He turned back to Nathan. Mr. Hale, you told this court minutes ago that the money was never transferred. You told your lender the opposite. Both statements cannot be true. One constitutes perjury. The other constitutes bank fraud. Nathan began to cry, not the quiet kind, the uncontrolled kind. He looked at me then, finally, desperation written across his face. Dad, he said, please, you know I would never hurt you. Tell them you signed it. Tell them you meant to help us. For a moment, the room felt smaller. The years pressed in on my chest. Memories rose uninvited. Teaching him to ride a bike, holding his hand on the first day of school, sitting beside his hospital bed after he broke his arm. Evelyn placed her hand lightly on my arm. She did not look at me. She did not need to. The judge turned to me. Mr. Hale, he said, please stand. I stood. Did you sign this document? No, Your Honor, I said. Can you prove it? Evelyn stepped forward and handed a set of papers to the bailiff, who carried them to the bench. Travel records, hotel receipts, conference registration, time-stamped photographs. Your Honor, Evelyn said, on the date this document was allegedly signed, my client was attending a professional conference out of state. He was physically incapable of signing it. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. Then he set them down and removed his glasses. Mr. Hale, he said to my son, you have just implicated yourself in serious criminal conduct in open court. Miranda stood abruptly. This is his fault, she shouted, pointing at Nathan. He told me it was handled. He said his father agreed. Sit down, the judge ordered. Two deputies had already moved closer.
The judge banged his gavel once. This court dismisses all civil claims with prejudice, he said. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the appropriate authorities for investigation of fraud, perjury, and elder financial abuse. He turned to the deputies. Take them into custody. Miranda screamed,
Nathan went limp as the deputies pulled his arms behind his back. As they passed my table, he looked at me one last time. "Dad," he sobbed. "Please." I met his eyes. "I already did everything I could," I said quietly. The courtroom doors closed behind them. I did not feel triumph. I felt empty. The judge addressed me again. "Mr. Hale, you are free to go. I'm sorry for what you have endured." I nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." Outside, the sunlight was blinding. I stood on the courthouse steps for a long moment, breathing in air that felt heavier than it had that morning. The lawsuit was over, but my family was gone. The world did not stop after the courtroom doors closed. It never does. For weeks afterward, my phone stayed silent. No apologies, no explanations, just legal notices and second-hand updates from my attorney. Nathan was formally charged. Miranda filed for separation before the ink on the arrest report dried. The house they fought so hard to keep was seized by the lender and locked behind a notice that read, "Under investigation." Everything they built on lies vanished faster than it appeared. I was not asked to testify again. The evidence spoke for itself. What surprised me most was not the fallout. It was the quiet that followed. Without the constant anxiety, without the dread of another threat or another demand, my home felt different, lighter. I began sleeping through the night again. I started walking in the mornings. I noticed small things I had ignored for years. Birds in the yard, the way sunlight hit the kitchen table my wife once sat at. I sold the house.
Not because I had to, because I wanted to close that chapter completely. I downsized, simplified, and restructured every asset I owned with careful intention. With my attorney's help, I created an irrevocable trust for my grandson. The terms were strict, untouchable by either parent, locked until adulthood, protected from the same greed that nearly destroyed us all. That was the hardest part. Not testifying, not watching my son in handcuffs, but accepting that loving someone does not mean saving them from consequences. Sometimes it means protecting what matters most from who they have become. I moved away shortly after, not far, but far enough to breathe. I bought a small recreational vehicle and started driving without a destination. I spent nights parked near lakes and mornings drinking coffee under open skies. For the first time in decades, my life belonged entirely to me. People ask if I regret what happened. I regret raising a son who believed entitlement was inheritance. I regret mistaking silence for peace. I regret waiting too long to say no, but I do not regret standing up for myself. Here is what I learned. Love without boundaries becomes permission. Support without accountability becomes destruction. And money given to avoid conflict always costs more in the end. Parents are not retirement plans. Children are not investments. And family does not mean surrendering your dignity to keep the illusion of harmony alive. The judge asked one question that day, but I had been asking myself the same one for years. When does helping become enabling? I finally answered it, and in doing so, I did not just save my future. I reclaimed my self-respect. I spent most of my life believing that being a good father meant always stepping in, always sacrificing, always saying yes. I thought love meant protection at any cost. But this experience taught me something painful and necessary. Love without boundaries becomes permission, and permission in the wrong hands turns into entitlement.
I did not lose my son because I said no. I lost him because he chose greed over integrity and lies over responsibility. By refusing to fund a life he had not earned, I did not destroy my family. I saved what was left of my dignity, my future, and my grandson's chance at something better. Sometimes the hardest act of love is letting people face the consequences of their own choices. Saying no was not cruelty. It was survival. Now, I want to ask you, what lesson did you take from this story? And where are you watching from today?